Ahoy, creator! Are you ready to party? Great, because in this tutorial, you will be learning how to create an explosive party game. This part of the tutorial covers the new camera devices, as well as an in-depth look at Sequencer and creative ways to use it in your game. Then, in part 2, you will learn how to create a hub that connects multiple games together. This is where players will vote on the game they want to play and return to between games instead of the lobby. You'll also learn how to create the verse device that manages the game and how to reuse that device for your other experiences. Tilt and Boom is a pirate-themed party game where players try their best to stay on the raft. The play area, or raft, is made up of a few different props attached to one parent prop. This lets you move just one piece of the raft or rotate the entire thing at one time. The ocean can be made by placing down an ocean blueprint and changing the settings to your liking. A damage volume is set up just below the raft so that if a player ever touches the water, they take a bit of damage. Since you're adding a hub and other games to this island, it's important to stay organized and keep all the devices and props for this game in a separate folder. Everyone loves the default Fortnite camera perspective, but without the new fixed-point camera device and third-person control device, this party game wouldn't be possible. To learn more about these devices, check out the in-depth documentation online. With the fixed-point camera device placed, use the preview in the bottom right corner to position it. Play around with the field of view values and keep adjusting until you find the perfect perspective. When the device is added to a player and the Look at Target setting is enabled, it takes that player as the target and will keep them centered even if they move. With the fixed-point camera device, the actual camera can't move in the game. It can only rotate to keep the player centered. You can also change the speed and acceleration of the camera's rotation. It's important to note that a low value will have the camera playing catch up to the player, while a value of 0 will always keep the player centered. To ensure the camera doesn't rotate too far off the play space, turn on the clamp setting. This setting basically forces the camera to only be able to rotate a certain amount before it stops following the player. A negative pitch value determines how far the camera can rotate downwards, and a positive value determines the maximum upwards rotation. A negative yaw value is how far to the left it can rotate, and positive how far to the right. You can find these values by rotating the camera to the furthest it should look, then check how much it rotated. Here, it rotated 4 degrees. That becomes the maximum yaw value, and you can make it negative for the minimum. Do the same to find the pitch values. Because you're using a different camera perspective than the normal Fortnite experience, a third-person control device is also needed. When added to a player, this device changes their controls to work with the new camera perspective. You can check out the online documentation to get an idea of what these values do, but out of the box, this device is already perfectly set up for this party game. With the camera and controls set, make a new folder in the content drawer called Sequences, and in there add another folder called Cannonballs. Sequencer is the tool in UEFN for creating cool cutscenes and cinematics, like you're watching here. But it can also be used in multiple ways to manipulate props, time device actions, and so much more. This party game will use a ton of level sequences, so it's important to know the basics. First, right-click in the Cannonballs folder and create a level sequence called Cannonball 01. Then open it and click on the new sequencer window. Starting at the top row of options, mouse over Show Time As and change it to seconds so the main timeline is easier to understand. Then change the sequence display rate to 60 FPS. Next, change the sequence to last for 7 seconds by changing the range end time view to 7 seconds. Then, click the current time selection and type 7 to move to the end of the sequence. Hit the Set Playback End to Current Position button to have the sequence end after, you guessed it, 7 seconds. On the left is the Tracks section. You can think of tracks as any prop, object, device, basically anything in the outliner. This is where you manipulate those props sometime after a sequence is played. For example, your cannonball hurtling down at the raft. Before you can add that cannonball to the sequence, you actually need a cannonball. So let's make one. Start by creating a sphere and add the asphalt black material. Call this sphere Cannonball Base. Now drag out a VFX spawner device and attach it to the cannonball base. Set the location to 0 so it exists inside the cannonball. Then select the campfire visual effect. This gives the cannonball a fire trail effect as it hurtles down at players. Grab an explosive device and do the same to have it exist inside of the cannonball base. Copy these settings to make sure things work properly, then customize these settings for your experience. Back in the level sequence, drag the cannonball base from the outliner into the track section. Do the same for the explosive device, fire trail VFX, and the entire platform parent object. Add the transform tracks for the cannonball base and platform, and the actor hidden in game tracks for the cannonball and fire trail. You'll also need the gameplay events track for the explosive device. Before you make the rest of the sequence, take a look at the finished product. Check out the cannonball's transform track. These keyframes manipulate props in different ways based on the track. A transform refers to the location, rotation, and scale of a prop. So the transform track lets you key a transform value at a certain time. For example, your origin point for the cannonball is in the sky outside of the player's view. The keyframe at 0 seconds sets the cannonball to the origin point every time the sequence is played. The second keyframe at 4 seconds places the cannonball where it should hit the raft and explode. When played, the cannonball will smoothly move between the 2 points. The visibility tracks hide the cannonball and smoke effect when it hits the platform. To make the cannonball explode, a gameplay event is triggered when it hits the raft 4 seconds in. Gameplay events let you activate a device's functions at a certain time in a sequence, like the explode function on the explosive device. At 7 seconds, the reset function is activated. That way, it's ready to explode again later. The platform's transform track handles rotating the platform based on where the cannonball explodes. The first keyframe is the default raft position, so every time the sequence plays, it makes sure the raft is normal. 4 seconds in, when the cannonball hits the platform, this position is keyframed again. Then, a second later, a new tilted position is keyframed. Simply rotate the raft a bit based on where the cannonball landed to make it tilt underwater. That way, after the cannonball explodes, the platform reacts over a short amount of time. This keyframe is duplicated to 6 seconds before the final keyframe at 7 seconds returns the platform to its original position. Playing the entire sequence, you can see how everything comes together to provide a dynamic experience. To set this up, move the cannonball base just out of the player's sight somewhere in the sky. This origin point will be where all cannonballs start. Add a keyframe for this position by clicking the Add Keyframe button. Then, 4 seconds later, move the cannonball somewhere on the raft where it should explode and set a new keyframe. Go back to 0 seconds in and add a visibility keyframe. Then 4 seconds in, when your cannonball makes landfall, keyframe the visibility to be off. Do the same for the fire trail effects visibility track. On the explosive device's gameplay events track, add a keyframe at 4 seconds. Then right-click it and change its gameplay event property to the explode function. Do the same at 7 seconds, but this time for the reset function. Now, set the keyframe for your normal raft position at 0 and 4 seconds. Then, based on where the cannonball landed, rotate the platform and keyframe that position at 5 seconds. Make another keyframe for this position at 6 seconds and copy the normal position for the raft at 7 seconds. And you're done! If you followed along, your sequence should now match the one on screen and work exactly as expected. But you probably want way more than just one spot for the cannonball to land, right? Well, all you need to do is duplicate the level sequence in the content browser and change these keyframes: the landing position of the cannonball and the raft's reaction. So, change the cannonball to be visible at 4 seconds so you can see what you're doing. Then move it to a new landing spot. Delete the keyframes that rotate the raft, and 5 seconds in, rotate it to react to the new position. Add that keyframe and duplicate it to 6 seconds. Make sure to make the cannonball invisible again, and that's it. You created a new cannonball sequence. Do this as many times as you want to create a ton of different locations for where the cannonball should land. Cannonball dodging alone isn't much of a party, so item spawners will be used to give all sorts of fun treats for players to knock each other around with. Place an item spawner device down somewhere on the platform and change these settings. Make sure to scale the item up a bit on your camera view so players can see it. Add in as many array elements as you want: chiller grenades, impulse grenades, buggy bombs, clanger grenades, you name it. Then duplicate the item spawners all around the raft. These item spawners will randomly activate throughout the game, which is set up in a verse device. To learn how to make that verse device, you'll have to watch part 2 of this tutorial, which you should go to now. See you there, creator!